This episode is presented by Avalara.
Hello, it's Al Farrell, CFO of Transaction Data Systems, and you're listening to CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 910.
So the big thing, at least for Appfire, is all about preparing for 10x scale and corporate hygiene. And both of these can make the foundation of the business hum much more efficiently, so we can focus on all the juicy stuff, which is growth. So for me, that's completing core system implementations across the board. And so we've been putting in one global system where we will never have to touch it, at least for the next decade. And that just alleviates so much time and complexity and waste.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's episode, we speak with Alex Triplett, CFO of Appfire. When Alex Triplett is asked to explain where and how he began acquiring his operations experience, his answer relies on one word more than any other: specificity. Back in 2006, Triplett had just completed a stint as an investment banker with Citigroup when he was hired by private equity firm TA Associates as an associate inside the firm's enterprise software and fintech realm. It was at TA when Triplett was sitting across the table from different founders of fintech companies that he realized his 10,000-foot view of the company's offerings would no longer cut it. To invest in a promising company, he would need to know cold, its product specifics, and increase his depth of knowledge. Still, that was only the beginning of a journey to the operations side of things. As we'll hear on today's episode, we'll begin after this.
This episode is presented by Avalara. That's the sound of not worrying about sales tax compliance. Because when you automate it with Avalara, you don't have to worry about collecting sales tax or tracking who and what is tax exempt. With Avalara, you don't even have to worry about new tax laws and regulations. Avalara does it for you. If your business sells internationally, Avalara has you covered with cross-border tax compliance solutions. And when it comes time to file tax returns, Avalara automatically takes care of that too, giving you one less thing to worry about. Avalara has managed billions of sales for small, mid-size, and enterprise businesses, and seamlessly works with your current sales, e-commerce, and accounting platforms. Take the worry out of tax compliance with Avalara. Learn more at avalara.com. That's AVALARA.com.
Hello, we're speaking with Alex Triplett, CFO of Appfire. Alex, welcome.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for having me.
So, Alex, we always begin, as always, by asking our guests to look back for us. And we're looking for you to share some of those experiences you feel prepared you for a finance leadership role. What would those be?
Yeah. So just to set the context, I became a CFO in 2014. I was at a large private fintech company called Ion Group. I had joined in 2010. The CFO role was actually my second role there. I was responsible for corporate development globally. And corporate development for us was all M&A, all capital raising, and managing our off-balance sheet private equity fund. And so in 2014, off the back of a couple of acquisitions, I got tapped on the shoulder to get a second role to become a CFO of our then second largest division. So I kept the CFO role from 2014 to when I left in 22, and I also kept that horizontal corp dev role as well. So that's a little bit of context about the CFO experience and how I got there. But just stepping back to your question, the first role I had out of school was investment banking at Citigroup in New York. And I really learned execution under pressure there. So I think many roles can prepare you for something like this: consulting, accounting, law. apprenticeship type jobs where you learn how to understand how to produce quality on time and under pressure. So that was definitely role number one that prepared me for, I think, better success in later career moves. And then the second job I had out of school was after Citi, I was in private equity. So I was at a business called TA Associates, growth private equity firm, very entrepreneurial culture. And so each associate, as I was, covers an area. Mine was enterprise software and fintech. And what you do is you proactively source investment opportunities in that area. And at TA, I learned the kind of macro lens of a market. So how to look at it and look at shape of the earth, or maybe 10,000 foot view of trends and drivers and players and long-term dynamics. And then you also learn the pattern recognition of reading people and understanding business models quite quickly. And then so when I joined Ion in 2010, what I was lacking was operational experience. And that is what Ion taught me, which is, okay, it's great to understand how to produce high quality on time under pressure. It's great to understand how to analyze shape of the earth or 10,000 feet or have pattern recognition, but do you actually know how a business works? And so then as an operator, you learn quite quickly. It comes down, at least in my experience in technology, to three things: people, product, customers. And you have to get it right. Every role in the organization. So that was my journey.
Now, you stepped in, as you mentioned already, when you joined Eon, it's a corporate development role. And was it, looking at potential acquisitions, or what were you up to there?
Absolutely. It was looking at potential acquisitions. At the time I joined, we were 600 people and roughly 100 million in revenue. By the time I left, we were 12,000 people and 3 billion in revenue. And so in my role, I acquired $15 billion worth of businesses, did 22 deals, and we expanded from one division in capital markets to then, when I left, 5 divisions, all in fintech, but starting to serve different needs. So division number 2, where I was the CFO, we called Ion Corporates, because we sold treasury and commodity management software to corporations large and small around the globe. We were quite clever with naming. But that was the role, was hunting for businesses that I thought, or we thought, could fit well within Ion, and then consummating those acquisitions. And then post-close, you inherit all sorts of things, which is how can I improve the product? How can I go to market? Maybe I need to optimize the operations. And oftentimes in my corp dev role, because I was close to the businesses, I would either execute or help that execution of the integration. And in doing that, that's where I fell into the CFO role, because we were forming this Ion Corporates division. And my founder and CEO tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, I really need somebody to steward this business as we bring a couple businesses together. And I want you to really get deeper in the operations of the business. So I'd like you to be CFO.
We have a lot of finance leaders who come on with those investment banking roots and corp dev roots, and it's not always easy to get over to the operations side. So how is that done? That's what's crossing my mind. That's not always easy.
Awesome. 2 distinct experiences helped me get closer to operations from a traditional investment banking private equity background. So experience number 1 was at TA, because I was covering fintech, which in capital markets has an incredible amount of specificity. Each market's very different. They trade differently. The tools are different. So if you go and you sell software to the FX desk at a bank versus equities execution for a hedge fund, it's 2 totally different pieces of software, and the nuances of the market are different, and what you need to do is different. And so by its nature, I was covering something that forced me to really get close to product, because I couldn't be credible otherwise. When I talked to these founders of businesses, if you didn't really understand what they were doing, you just didn't come off very, very well. And I was not the only private equity person calling them interested in their company. And so I really started to read a lot of literature, do a lot of demos, really get used to seeing product. And so that was kind of 1A. 1B was some of the investments we made at TA. I was sitting in the boardroom, and we'd have these quarterly meetings, and you could tell there were strategic things afoot and big decisions being made. And when I saw those discussions, I kind of felt like my investment partners actually didn't know what the answer was. Great investors, amazing people, understand how to manage a fund very, very well. Didn't understand how to give strategic advice to a company that was trying to understand whether we pivot left or pivot right. And so because of that, I realized I can be a better investor and a better professional if I get closer to the operation. So that's what initially kind of drew me to Ion. And I came in with that experience of passion for product, wanting to look at product, thinking that that was a very important part of any business, certainly a software business. And so those two things then fueled me to point two, 1A and 1B fueled me to point two, which is when I got into Ion, I was really not in a sheltered environment where you're the corp dev person and you're insulated. It was, look, we have jobs to do, all of us. And so if there are jobs to be done and we've got capable people, private business, founder owned, we're going to find people to do those jobs. And so one of those happened to be when we acquired a business in 2012, which was a futures trading business in London. It had just made an acquisition itself of an equities trading business in New York. And at the time, Ion was focused on futures and fixed income. Nobody really knew equities. And it was a small business line, 10 million of revenue, maybe 100 people. And my founder said, I want you to essentially run this business for the next 12 months while we integrate the other bigger business. And so there I was basically just given this really interesting opportunity I would not have sought out because he needed somebody on the ground. I live in New York. That was closer to equities. I'd had more experience than pretty much anybody else at Ion in the equities domain. And as a 29, 30-year-old, I got a chance to be a general manager of a business for a period of time. And what do you have to do? You go talk to customers. You talk to your product and development team. You understand how we're using resources. You start to understand how we're going to shape outcomes of the business the next quarter, the next year, the next couple of years. You understand how competitive dynamics and pricing is affecting our ability to sell, or is a reason why we're effective in our ability to sell. So that was really what led me into being prepared for the CFO role, because at that point I was, pretty used to understanding it's people, products, and customers that drive a business. That was kind of the triangle of focus that we used, the mental model we used for acquiring businesses at Ion. And that's how I got there. So for anybody that is in a private equity or investment banking role now, thinking about being a CFO, first I would say it's an amazing opportunity and it will broaden your horizons immensely. And then the second thing is, like everything, it's not rocket science. It takes some elbow grease. So get close to the product that the company is selling. Start to understand what the customers use, what their pain points are, what they need. And it doesn't have to be software. It can be shoes. It can be healthcare services. It can be anything. But if you put yourself in the mind frame of a customer, you speak to them, and you put yourself in the mind frame of your product or your R&D team or your manufacturing workforce to understand how they're making the thing that is ultimately driving your business, you're set.
Some nice detail there for us. So thank you for that, Alex. We do have perhaps a few more career-related questions for you, but right now let's find out about Appfire. Tell us about this company. What does it do, and what are its offerings about?
Yeah. So we are the leading global provider of next generation apps that enhance, augment, extend, and connect the world's leading platforms like Atlassian, Microsoft, Salesforce, and Monday. So we have a knowledge worker base that are using these platforms, and they could be using them because they are developers and they're using them for workflow, or they could be IT service management. They're using them for help desk support, both internally and externally. They could be in development operations. So focusing on the tool chain that the product and development team might use. And all of those knowledge workers like the platforms, they use them every day, but they don't do all the specific things that they want them to do. And so there's all these little pain points. And we have apps that come in and delightfully solve those pain points, and they're very specific. So they do what they say they're supposed to do, no more, no less. And they allow our knowledge worker base to work the way they want to work, allow them to tweak and customize the platform the way they want it to be.
Now, it's private equity owned today. Can you maybe take us back in time and give us a shorthand history of the capital structure?
Yeah. So the quick answer to your question is we've got two minority investors. One is TA, so it's my old firm as an investor. This is the relationship that allowed me to find this wonderful opportunity. And then the second is Silversmith Capital Partners, who is a growth private equity firm in Boston. And ironically enough, the lead partner at Silversmith was one of my old colleagues at TA. So it's very much relationships that I know and trust. Appfire as a business, really, we're in what I call phase 3. So in 2019, we took the model from what it had been to now what it is, which is all apps, all recurring software. We were 10 million of annual recurring revenue at the time. Fast forward to today, we are 170 million of recurring revenue. So quite explosive growth. We went from 50 fireflies, as we call our people, to now over 750. So just in the last 4 years, it's been just an incredible story. And we've had good backers, minority investors from Silversmith and TA. Part of the genesis of, I think, why we're special is our founder founded our business actually back in 2005. So he saw the world of software shrinking. He saw that platforms were becoming open source and extensible. He was managing large teams at Vodafone who were using this open source tool called Jira, which was produced by Atlassian, at that time a very small private company. And he wanted to build an app business. And so he called a business Appfire in 2005, 1 year before Apple App Store, 1 year before Salesforce produced the Exchange. And when you call a business Appfire in 2005, there's not a lot of activity going on because you can't monetize apps. There's nowhere to sell them. There's no marketplace. So along the way, he developed a deep relationship with Atlassian. He helped them develop. He was one of the people that laid the code on their marketplace. In 2012, that Atlassian marketplace allowed us to sell our apps and receive money for them. We call it monetization. So you could make a living doing what he intended to do. And then by 2019, it was set that was a business that we could continue to progress wholly in. So Appfire's got a really interesting journey, and today 15,000 customers, including half the Fortune 500, use our apps every single day to get their work done.
Now, you step into the CFO role a little more than a year ago, I think. And, do you reorganize things at all, or what do you have to do to get the house in order the way a new CFO would?
Yeah, this was really fun. And I have to tell you, even having had my experiences at Ion, you always kind of wonder, can I do it again? Is it going to be different? I'd been at Ion for 12 years and had that nice, insulated, knew everything about everything, had probably brought most of the folks in either through acquisitions or organic hiring. And so when I left, and it was a difficult decision, but I ultimately liked the explosive growth aspect of Appfire and thought the culture was amazing, and it was just a new challenge. I did a couple weeks of research on the business itself and then the market, so I could at least get a little bit familiar. I was already somewhat familiar, but a little bit more familiar with, okay, what are the inner workings? What kind of things do we do? What do we face out there in the ecosystems that we're in? And then when I first got into Appfire, rather than coming in with a plan, I used the Socratic method. So for the first 3 weeks, all I did was extensive engagement, interviews, just soaking up what was going on within the company, not just within the finance team, but all levels of the organization across the board, and starting to understand, how do we do things? What are our systems? What's working? What's not working? What do we love? What do we hate? And took down a whole litany of notes. And then I generated my 180-day plan for the board. And key premise number one was, I need to build a finance team that is prepared to 10x Appfire's growth. And so remember, we just came from 50 people in 2019 to 750 in 2022 when I joined. So it was 500 when I joined, but it was explosive growth already. But when you do that, you just start to outstrip people's capabilities and systems and all those kinds of things, because the difference in running a 50-person business in 2019 to a 500-person business in 2022 and now a 750-person business, it's markedly different. And so the mental model I had was, okay, we're going to get from where we are today to probably a 3,000-person business. What's that look like? And fortunately, at Appfire or at Ion, I knew, because I'd been at a 12,000 person business, and I'd seen that rise. And so part of it was build finance team that could 10x Appfire again and be public ready if we wanted to be, which is a different level of I think, difficulty in terms of just what's material, how refined and systematic your process is. The second one was close our audit. We had an outstanding audit, was open. It had been open for a while. I needed to close that. So just kind of, motherhood and apple pie, close the audit. The third was implement NetSuite. So core accounting system. I wanted to put a system in place that I wouldn't have to think about ever again in my Appfire life. So that's NetSuite. Made a decision, and we just immediately started implementing. The fourth was renegotiate my credit agreement and basically start to put in place a better in class treasury capability, because got to manage cash, got to manage the balance sheet, make sure that that's buttoned up. And then the last but not least was build an annual budget. And so we had not had a company, despite our explosive growth, that really had a rigorous budgeting process. And I brought that into the business as well. And when we did the retrospective 6 months later, we'd accomplished everything. So we had a small finance team of 10 people and some outsourced accounting. And within 6 months, I kid you not, Jack, we had 30 people in finance, all in-sourced skills and public ready skills that we hired. Folks that had come from public companies or had come from Big Four accountants serving public companies. And then the other thing that we started to do, at least within finance, was I started to do a weekly all hands global call. So let's make sure everybody's really aligned. Let's make sure everybody's really on the same page. We did a all department meeting offsite in Boston. This was around 6 months that I'd been in the company. We had folks from 6 countries, many of whom had never traveled out of their country, all come to the US, gather in one place. And again, it's, okay, what have we done the last 6 months? What are we going to do for the rest of 2022 and 2023? And then what's the 5-year goal? So let's raise the bar. Let's think about where we want to go to get people excited about this journey, which is going to be climbing a mountain. And then the last is we have finance leaders have a weekly stand-up every Wednesday. And so again, it's just making sure the 6 or 7 or 8 key people on the team are able to have a forum to coalesce thoughts, swarm problems, those kinds of things. So that was the first 6 months.
Trying to understand your FP&A resources. Is it a specific FP&A team, or do you deploy your FP&A knowledge differently? What is your sort of mindset when it comes to FP&A?
Yeah, we had no FP&A department, and so we now have a team. It is 3 people. I hired somebody specifically that had been doing FP&A at public companies before, because part of really what I wanted was rigor in the budget process, rigor in budget versus actuals, someone who had seen scale and seen complexity and knew how to adopt tools, and also knew how to engage business partners, because part of what we have FP&A doing is really driving business behavior by giving information to our business leaders. So the CMO and the head of channel and customer success and the head of people and whomever else, looking at spend versus actuals and making sure that we are really open with how things work in their organizations as they grow them, as they add tools or they add people or they make changes, but how that affects the P&L, and then making them involved in the numbers. And so he's been amazing at that. And then the 2 folks under him are really focused on budgeting, forecasting, producing the monthly board packs and doing those, with rigor on time, continuing to approve. So we stood up an FP&A function, and I keep it a little bit separate from main finance. So I've got a VP finance who essentially is my chief accounting officer and soon will be, who is my right hand. He's amazing. He manages 27 of the 30 people, and then FP&A is still directly under me as a 3. And then my FP&A leader and my chief accounting officer, they work hand in glove. But that was another critical hire as well, is you have to get a right hand that knows how to run audits, understands inward and outwards procurement process, has seen complexity, thinks about finance as a function that serves the organization, because a lot of what we do is customer service. So you want to procure something, we've got now one system, one process. You want to travel, one system, one process, but that touches everybody. And if you're doing a good job, people go, okay, that makes sense. I like that, finance has a good process. If you're not doing a good job, they go, oh man, they're a bottleneck. I think I went a little off tangent with the FP&A.
One of the things I'm always curious about is if there was a particular metric or a business dynamic that hadn't been getting all the scrutiny or the attention maybe it needed in the organization. And we know that there are loads of these perhaps, but would love to know about just one that maybe as you stepped into the role and as you rolled out your team and you created this FP&A unit, maybe it originated there, a certain measurement or a number, or something came to somebody's attention over your chief accounting officer, perhaps. Don't know. Want to give you a wide berth here, but would love to know if there was a particular metric that you had to raise the profile of or make the organization begin paying attention to or understand better, and how you went about that. You've shared some great details so far, so we're hoping you can illuminate this for us.
Yeah, and you boxed me in though a little bit, Jack, because you asked me just for one. I'll give you the most important one, and then I'll kind of add on how it's all driven. Certainly in software, there is a key metric that I believe drives valuation and comparison to peers, but also isn't the reason why it is so important and it drives valuation and comparison to peers is it boils down the essence of a business, certainly a software business, quite clearly. Rule of 40. Growth rate plus profitability margin. And you combine the two together, and the rule of thumb is you should be at 40%. So you can grow 40% and have zero profit, 40. You can grow at 20% and have 20% profit, you can be 40. And you want to be better than that. And then if that is the North Star, it then dovetails into all sorts of behaviors. Okay, let's grow faster. Well, how can we grow faster with being crafty with our spend? Okay, we're going to grow slower. How can we maybe halt some or slow down some hiring or be really thoughtful about adding vendors or traveling to increase the profitability margin? The rule of 40 is the key. And so that was the first one that we gravitated to, and we just started putting it in every single board deck. It's on page 1 is the title, page 2 is the table of contents, page 3 is the summary. It's always on page 3. Rule of 40, rule of 40, rule of 40. So that was the key one. A couple of things below that we then used to drive the business to produce a better rule of 40. In our business, gross retention we think is pure. So are customers staying or are they going? Gross retention. And that is how the customer success team is managing the business. Its marketing looks at this. So I like metrics that the business actually uses and adopts that then I can communicate also to the external world, because if the two aren't linked, it just becomes very difficult. Finance is looking here, maybe the investor relations is saying one thing, and then the business is doing something totally different. So gross retention is a key one for us, helps drive rule of 40. Smart ratio is another one for us. And so this is the ARR you added in this quarter or some period divided by the sales and marketing costs of the last period. You ideally want that to be over 1. I added $1 of ARR, I spent $1 of costs, great. 1 divided by 1. It's great if it's 2 or 3. A lot of companies have it negative, and then they start to look at other metrics to shore that up. But we look at smart ratio. So are we accretively adding ARR? And then something that's specific for us is we look at app attach. So our average customer takes 4 apps. We have over 100. And so for us to grow, all you need to do is sell customers 1 more app. And our channel and growth team, they're obsessed with that. And I love that metric. And I think it's a great metric because you add apps, you'll grow. It helps the rule of 40. And it's something I can communicate to the external world too, because it's a very easy to kind of understand metric. So rule of 40.
I want to touch on talent with you as the organization as a whole, really, and hiring and some of the challenges companies have faced. We know it's a different environment than it was a year ago. At the same time, since COVID, finance seems to be much more involved in talking about people issues and trying to understand better human capital. What about you? Having stepped in here a year ago, having grown your own team quite a bit, you're well aware of a lot of the challenges out there about retaining and holding on to people. Do you have a different mindset on talent maybe than you did, back in Ion? Has it evolved somewhat given so much that we've been discussing, the remote environment, um, tech is changing. We have new AI technologies coming in. What is your talent mindset evolving? And we'll assume it always has been, but what would you share with us?
Yeah. What a great topic. So, one of the benefits that we have at Appfire is in the US, we've been remote first since 2005 when Randall founded the business. And so, for us, COVID didn't create a situation where we all had to exit the office and couldn't come back. We'd never had offices in the US. Of the 750 people, 170 are in the US. The rest are outside the US where we do have offices, but we give people the hybrid flexibility. And you can typically get people coming in for half the week and not for the other half of the week. And it works well. The benefit of that is I can really look at people not saying, hey, you have to be in or around this zip code, but you've just got to have the qualifications that I'm looking for. So a great example of this, my head of audit and accounting compliance, he lives in Anchorage, Alaska. My tax director, San Francisco. My chief accounting officer, outside of Boston. So you can basically have this flexibility because I found them due to certain set of expertise. At least the way I thought about building an organization, and I would encourage others to do that. I do all the interviews myself. I'm a believer that you want to have at least 3 interviews, maximum 5, so don't exhaust the process. Certainly different viewpoints. So a lot of times I'd bring somebody in outside of finance to do interviews with me. Completely different mindset. Part of it's cultural fit. Part of it's, do they sense that this person's got the right level of energy? Are they going to be able to help us scale? Can they scale themselves? There's a whole load of things that I want to make sure I don't have blinders on. So I've always been a big fan of a good, well-rounded interview process, external viewpoints outside of departments, and particularly if you need to build a department quickly, at least for me, do the interviews yourself. And part of it's also you're able to then pitch the vision that you have and sell the company, and you build a personal relationship off the bat before somebody joins the company. So that's how I thought about building up our talent. Once they've gotten in the door, one of the things that I've changed or evolved, I'd say, my mindset on is how do teams fit together. So I've taken a lot of various kind of profiles, the Carl Jung profiles, the Clifton Strengths Finder, some of the others, and for personal reasons, I think it can improve me. You can kind of reflect. I'm strong over here. I'm not inclined to focus over there. I need to know that about myself. Here's the things that could get me in trouble. Here's the things that really are good strengths to double down on. Those types of things. But we've got a learning and development head, and she came in and she said, you really ought to do this for your leaders because you want to see how your team meshes together. That has been where I've evolved my thinking on talent. And I think that could go deeper to everybody in the organization. And it's really less about what's everyone's profile and what are the upsides and downsides in an individual, but it's more about team creation. Like a sports team is, you can't go out there with all wide receivers. If we're talking about NFL football, you have to have some people that want to block. This is how it works, right? So you want to have that right composition. And we did that in the Boston offsite that we had, my 7 leaders, we all took Clifton Strengths Finders. And then we all had a several-hour session that was really proctored and curated by our head of learning and development, where she went through what each of our Cliftons said, and we shared them with each other, and we understood more about each other. And then it's going, okay, how might you pair different people to balance small teams? Or how might you be aware that certain people's nature is to be X versus Y? That's been really my big evolution is I think those personality tests and those profiles can be really informative about, something that some of us are genetically born a certain way, right? I'm high energy. It's hard for me to turn it down. It's just who I am.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We're going to jump to what we refer to as our finance strategic moment question. This might have happened anytime during your course of your career, but we're looking for a moment of insight that you experienced along the way because of your lines of sight as a finance executive. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Yeah, there have been many, but there was a specific situation that we had at Ion where we in 2018 had now become three divisions, and we had now become about $1.5 billion in revenue. So quite a bit of scale since 2010 when I joined. And our divisions were Ion Markets, Corporates, and Analytics. And each of them had their own ring fence capital structure, and they had their own management teams. I was the CFO of Ion Corporates, but we didn't operate like a business normally operates. We had a monthly reporting cadence of the financials. We didn't have a monthly business cadence. And Ion Corporate specifically, we were a 600 million revenue business with 2,000 people and 2,000 customers. That's a big business. We didn't have a monthly business review. And so my finance strategic moment was in 2018, myself and a peer really created the groundwork and stitched together the monthly business review process, the MBR framework at Ion. And the beauty was we were able to produce financial numbers quickly. That's great. But what we really focused on, the other side of the quantitative with the MBRs at Ion, was the business numbers. So let's look at the marketing funnel and go, MQLs to SQLs to then pipeline conversion. Let's look at professional services and utilization and bill rates. Let's look at customer support and look at CSAT and NPS and number of tickets and tickets opened and closed and things of that nature, where as a finance professional, your mind is always very structured. You think like an Excel table. I got columns, I got rows, I want to see things in time series. And that can be really helpful to provide a framework for business folks who, frankly, if you're running a support desk, you need to close tickets. You don't normally think, well, how do I visualize and how do I wrap metrics around my efficiency? So the Ion MBR process in 2018 really allowed us to do that. And we also then were able to start thinking about not the what, which was the numbers, both financial and business, but then the why and how. So why are these things happening and they're good? Why are these things happening and they're not good? How can we change execution to change the outcome of the numbers? And it allowed us to have a pretty rigorous monthly cadence as a management team and allowed us to build a basis of what's our annual plan. And it was much more than a budget. It was a business plan, certain key product investments, very few bets that we wanted to make, strategic hires, shifting around resources, those kind of things, because you're doing it off the basis of this really good, foundation, this MBR. And the other thing that we ended up doing off the back of that was we were heavy Microsoft shop, and we were using Tableau quite extensively on top of, or Power BI, I should say, and Tableau in concert, but mostly Power BI on top of pretty much every database, quote unquote, we had, whether it's Salesforce or otherwise. And so we built real-time dashboards that produced the business metrics for the MBR, but also we could see them every single day. So PS utilization, or the marketing funnel, or sales operations efficiency, or the sales pipeline, or your ARR stats cut by geography or customer type or whatever you wanted. And so we could log into Power BI and you had all the MBR metrics there in real time. And then when you produced the MBR, that was a non-event because you already had the metrics, you were looking at them. And oh, by the way, you didn't even come together once a month to start to think about, okay, what does this say and how am I going to change? Because you were looking at it every day and we had to stand up every week. You were constantly trying to tune the business. And so really the MBR, when we talked to our founder and CEO, and he would come in and say, okay, what are you seeing? What are you guys doing about it? We'd already been doing and doing the changing along the way. So it really was quite efficient for the business, and really brought us together as a team as well. So MBR process.
From episode 859, this is 1 Minute with Rajat Bari. CFO of iCertis.
PwC, Deloitte, Accenture, KPMG, they're all building practices around us. And they also tend to give us leads. So, our focus is to make sure, first of all, the customers we acquire as the most efficient fashion. And once we get them, make sure that they stay with us for a long time and we expand with them. That's the basic thing that drives value.
We're going to jump to what we refer to as our mentoring round, which is where, once again, we're going to ask you to look back. And we're wondering about your first 30 days in a CFO role. If you look back to that first 30 or 60 days, there must have been something you wish you knew then. And again, we're going to allow you to revisit your younger self now. What would that piece of advice be if you could just go back in time?
Yeah, I was initially very worried that I had to be an expert in accounting, which I took in college, but it wasn't my favorite class. That I had to be an expert in tax code, which I happily read from time to time, but it's not the first book or PDF on my list. And what I quickly realized was a CFO is a driver of growth. It's a steward of value for shareholders or the shareholder, and it's a capital allocator. And so accounting matters and taxes matter and operational efficiency and all these things absolutely matter. But ultimately, you as a CFO need to be a driver of growth and a steward of capital and a capital allocator because you're closer to the numbers and probably you have more ability to navigate the numbers than pretty much anybody else in the organization. And so then your ability to say, okay, well, what business outcomes will change those numbers, or what things do we need to do? Shifts do we need to make to change numbers, or how can I safeguard our cash or safeguard our shareholder value? That's more of what a CFO is, I think, these days. So growth driver CFO was what I found myself to be, and then it took kind of the initial concern I had, which was I'm not doing debit and credit journal entries every day. This was me in 2014. Oh man. Am I going to have to go rip open our accounting system and start to look at that? And the answer is I've got people that are awesome. I've always had people that are awesome that are able to do that. They love that. They're really good at that. And then their joy is they escalate that to me, and I can look at a set of financials and navigate it. But then I can also go a click above that and look at the business numbers and navigate how those marry up with the financials. And so, yeah, CFOs are drivers of growth.
We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side. We're wondering if you're known for sort of a personal habit, part of a routine, something you've done over time. People pointed out to you, he's always done that. Why? We don't know. Anything come to mind? Personal habit, routine, something you're known for.
I wake up at 4:30 or 4:45 every morning. Go to the gym or work out on the bike or go for a run, and doesn't matter where I am or what time zone my body thinks it's supposed to be on. I've got the alarm set for that, and it's just I'm a morning person. I like to start early and get up and get after it, and I like a good good body movement before I start my day. Kind of switches my brain on. So yeah, that's been a big personal habit, and people look at me with a quizzical face sometimes when they see my alarm clock. Not for everybody.
Is there a book you might recommend to us? Doesn't have to be a business book. Might be something that influenced your thinking one way or another. Could be a book you escape with. Don't know.
Yeah. There is a book. There's several books I'd recommend just in general, kind of round out the business learning. And I'm a pretty avid reader, but I'll give you one I'm reading right now, and then maybe a couple others I've recently read. I'm reading something that's really around ability to macro think and take a lot of clicks back, shape of the earth thinking. It's called Disunited Nations by Peter Zahar, and his premise is how countries are really set up for long-term success or failure, partly just based on the geography that they are in. which has really dictated outcomes for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Disunited Nations. Super interesting.
Nice. We haven't had it.
Yeah, I read
Who's the author again?
Peter Zeihan, Zeihan, Disunited Nations. Couple books before that, one that was interesting that I read was called the Scout Mentality or the Scout Mindset by Julia Galef. And so her premise is most of us are soldiers in decision making. And this happens in business, it happens in personal, it happens in political. We don't really look at everything with an unbiased 360-degree view. And so her point was a scout is constantly mapping ahead and saying, okay, I'm discovering this new thing. Oh, this new fact. Let me update my understanding. Or maybe I don't know everything, right? Maybe I need to look at over this other mountaintop or look at this other, vista, and I'm going to see something that's different. And so it really is about how to unwind decision-making bias, which I think is incredibly important in business. And that was a good one as well.
Excellent. Well, we're up to our final question where we ask you to look forward finally. The coming 12 months we're interested in. What would your CFO priorities be for that period?
Yeah. So the big thing, at least for Appfire, is all about preparing for 10x scale and corporate hygiene. And both of these can make the foundation of the business hum much more efficiently so we can focus on all the juicy stuff, which is growth, growth, growth. So for me, that's completing core system implementations across the board. And so we've been putting in not only NetSuite, but Salesforce, Workday, ADP, Coupa, Greenhouse, Jira for all development and client support. So basically, one global system where we will never have to touch it, at least for the next decade. And that just alleviates so much time and complexity and waste. Particularly as we grow, add people, maybe make acquisitions. And then the second level to that is now we've got to really automate and RPA as much system and processes around that to make the organization really, really efficient. So that's the next 12 months. And doing all of that then just sets that foundation. So a lot of my time can be spent thinking about growth drivers.
Excellent. Alex Triplett, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
Hello, Thought Leader listeners. As you have perhaps already heard or even seen, we're now featuring the career lessons and moments of strategic insight shared by our CFO guests as Thought Leader videos. You can now find these videos on our blog at cfothoughtleader.com and, of course, our newsletters, but also on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, please go ahead and follow our CFO Thought Leader LinkedIn company page, and you'll be certain not to miss a single Thought Leader video debut. CFO Thought Leader, the #1 thought leadership platform exclusively for and by CFOs. As always, thank you for listening.